The Aurora's edge drifted silently through the star-strewn void, its sleek metallic hull reflecting faint starlight. Inside, the hum of machinery filled the corridors, a constant reminder of the life and technology that kept the ship moving through the vast unknown. For most of the crew, the ship was home, a place where routines were repeated day after day, and each engineer, pilot, and officer knew their place. But today there was tension in the air, a quiet unease that no spoke of openly. At the heart of this tension was Lyra Vey, a diplomat of unmatched authority from the planet Cerethus. Her species was known throughout the galaxy for their rigid hierarchies and sharp intellect. They expected obedience, and anyone who defied their standards was quickly dismissed, often permanently. Lyra had been summoned to the Aurora's edge for a mission that required delicate negotiations with newly contacted civilizations, but her presence unsettled the crew in ways they didn't fully understand. Her piercing gaze seemed to weigh them, judging their competence, their character, even their very worth. No one dared to approach her. Conversations fell silent when she entered a room, and those who tried to speak often stumbled over their words. Crew members avoided the common areas she frequented, leaving seats empty around her during meals. It wasn't that they disliked her, it was respect, fear, or perhaps a combination of both. In one of the quieter corridors, Jonas Cadet moved with practiced ease, carrying his toolkit and checking the energy conduits. Jonas was a human engineer, quiet, unassuming, and entirely different from the alien engineers who walked with precision and formality. To the aliens, humans were reckless, chaotic, unpredictable. Their ingenuity often surprised other species, but it was paired with a stubbornness that seemed illogical. Jonas knew this well. He had spent most of his life proving that humans could do more than their reputation suggested. The corridor was empty, as it often was during late shifts. The glow from the control panels cast soft shadows along the walls. Jonas adjusted a loose panel and crouched to inspect a faulty power conduit. Sparks danced briefly before he rewired the connections, and the conduit hummed steadily once more. He rose, wiping grease from his hands, and noticed the empty bench against the wall. It was the only seat available in this long stretch of the corridor, and, as always, it was near Lyra. Lyra sat there, reading data from a small handheld device. Her expression was calm, composed, but there was an intensity to her eyes that made others hesitate. Her fingers moved gracefully across the device, inputting commands with precision. Jonas paused, weighing his options. Everyone else avoided the seat. It was considered a privilege few dared approach. But he was tired, and his legs ached from hours of maintenance in cramped spaces. He set his toolkit down and, without a word, quietly took the seat beside her. The silence that followed was thick. Lyra's gaze flicked toward him, sharp and appraising. Jonas didn't flinch. Instead, he gave a small nod, a subtle acknowledgement of her presence. The other crew members passing by whispered among themselves, exchanging glances that mixed disbelief with admiration. Humans had a reputation, but this quiet courage, this calm defiance, was rare even among their kind. Lyra studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't speak immediately. She didn't need to. The act itself was enough to communicate volumes. Jonas, meanwhile, opened a small panel on his toolkit and began checking schematics for the next system he needed to inspect. He worked with a methodical focus, completely undistracted by the scrutiny he knew he was under. Minutes passed. The corridor remained silent except for the soft hum of the ship and the occasional beep from Lyra's device. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and even. "Human," she said. "You do not seem afraid." Jonas glanced at her briefly, then back at his schematics. "Fear is useful when it keeps you alive," he said, "but it can also make you hesitate when action is needed." She raised an eyebrow. Few beings spoke to her in such a direct manner, and even fewer spoke in a way that did not betray nervousness or flattery. Jonas's tone was calm, almost casual, yet there was an unmistakable confidence in it. Lyra found herself intrigued, though she would not admit it. "You understand our protocols?" she continued, her voice still measured. "Yet you ignore them." Jonas shrugged slightly. "Protocols are a guide, not a cage. If following them exactly would lead to failure, I find a better way." Her eyes lingered on him, studying the angles of his face, the steadiness of his hands, the quiet certainty in his posture. It was rare for anyone to challenge her without fear. It was rarer still for someone to do it and survive. The silence stretched again, and then a sudden alarm blared through the ship. The red warning lights flashed as the Aurora's edge registered a minor power surge. Other engineers rushed from their stations, some panicking, others debating the proper procedure. Jonas, however, remained seated for a moment, assessing the data streaming across his handheld device. Then, without hesitation, he stood and moved toward the engine room. Lyra followed at a distance, curious despite herself. The aliens, trained to react with precision and caution, hesitated at the sight of Jonas moving calmly toward the danger. Their procedures were strict, often requiring multiple confirmations before action. Jonas needed none. His hands moved deftly over the conduits, rerouting power, bypassing circuits that were failing, improvising solutions the others had not considered. Sparks flew, lights flickered, but within moments the system stabilized. Lyra arrived at the engine room entrance just in time to see the final adjustments being made. Jonas wiped his hands on a cloth and turned to her, expression neutral. "The surge is contained. No damage to the main core." She studied him, noting the efficiency of his actions, the confidence in his movements, and the calm focus that had guided him through the crisis. No other crew member could have acted so swiftly, so decisively. There was a spark of something unusual: ingenuity, courage, and a disregard for rules when rules hindered results. Lyra realized that humans in their unpredictable ways often possessed qualities that many alien species overlooked. "I see," she said finally, her voice still calm but carrying a hint of approval. "You act without fear, without hesitation. You take risks that others would not even consider." Jonas nodded once. "I act to solve the problem. Fear doesn't help, and hesitation can be fatal." Lyra allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. Not at a report, not at a calculation, but at a human who had dared to sit beside her when no one else would, who had faced a problem calmly while others faltered. For the rest of the evening, Jonas moved through the ship, quietly inspecting systems, making small adjustments, fixing minor problems that would have caused bigger issues later. Lyra observed him from a distance, fascinated by the way he worked. He spoke to the alien engineers politely, occasionally offering suggestions, but never with condescension. His presence was steadying, a reminder that sometimes courage and intelligence were more valuable than strict adherence to protocol. That night in the quiet corridors of the Aurora's edge, a subtle shift began. Crew members who had avoided Lyra now whispered among themselves, not in fear, but in curiosity. The human engineer had challenged the unspoken rules and survived. More than that, he had succeeded where others might have failed. Lyra herself returned to her quarters later, still thinking of Jonas. She had dealt with many beings in her life, diplomats, negotiators, leaders, but rarely had she encountered someone so unassuming, so unremarkable at first glance, who possessed such a rare combination of calm, cleverness, and courage. There was something about humans, she realized, that made them unpredictable, dangerous, and astonishingly capable. And in that unpredictability lay potential. Jonas, meanwhile, returned to the empty seat beside her the next morning. No words were exchanged this time. None were needed. The act itself spoke volumes. Lyra glanced at him briefly, nodded slightly, and went back to her device. The quiet understanding between them was palpable, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted. The Aurora's edge sailed on, carrying its crew into unknown space, but now with the quiet knowledge that humans could do what others would not, could face what others feared, and could take the unthinkable risks that sometimes were the only path to survival. And as Lirave continued to watch this human quietly taking his place beside her, she began to wonder just how far these unpredictable, daring beings might take the galaxy. The day began quietly aboard the Aurora's edge, but tension lingered like a thin fog over the corridors. Crew members moved with cautious efficiency, casting occasional glances toward Lyra Vey, who now occupied the central observation deck. Unlike the previous day, some of them dared to sit closer to her during the briefing, though most remained far enough away to avoid catching her scrutiny. Jonas Cadet, however, walked through the corridors with the same calm assurance he always carried. The human's reputation for recklessness followed him, but he ignored it. His focus was on the ship, its systems, and the tasks that had to be completed. The minor surge from the night before had revealed weaknesses in the ship's power grid, and Jonas had already mapped out several areas that needed immediate attention. As he approached the engineering bay, he noticed the alien engineers clustered around a holographic console, debating animatedly over the best way to redistribute power. Their discussion was technical, precise, and formal, but also slow. The system required quick intervention, and their rigid procedures would not allow them to act fast enough. Jonas stepped forward, his presence immediately noticed. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "I can handle that." The lead engineer hesitated. It was rare for a human to speak directly in these situations, much less offer to take control. Hesitation turned into quiet grumbling, as if some unspoken rule had been broken. Lyra, watching from the observation deck, tilted her head slightly. There was that same quiet courage she had seen yesterday. Jonas moved toward the console, studying the readouts with trained eyes. The alien engineers watched, curious and cautious. With a few swift gestures, Jonas adjusted the energy flows, rerouted redundant circuits, and stabilized the grid. Lights flickered and screens flashed, but within moments, the system hummed steadily. The lead engineer frowned, clearly torn between pride and surprise. "You solved it without following protocol." Jonas looked up, expression neutral.
"Protocol is a guide. The goal is stability."
"Rules alone don't fix problems."
Lyra leaned forward from her seat.
Her sharp gaze followed him closely. "You understand efficiency and risk in a way others do not."
"You are
unusual for your species." Jonas gave a small shrug. "We adapt. That's what humans do." The alien engineers exchanged uncertain glances, some impressed, others skeptical. But a shift had begun. The human's reputation for unpredictability suddenly seemed less a liability and more an asset. Later, the ship's communication systems buzzed with an urgent alert. An unknown vessel had entered the Aurora's edge's path, moving rapidly and without identification. Protocol required the ship to issue a standard hail and wait for a response before taking any defensive measures. The alien officers argued over the proper wording and timing, each step slowing the process. Jonas, standing quietly nearby, studied the sensor readings. He noted the speed, the trajectory, and the lack of identification signals. "If they're hostile," he said, "we won't have time to wait." "We need a plan now." Lyra's attention snapped to him. "And what do you propose?" she asked, her tone both curious and challenging. Jonas pointed to the readings. "We can create a diversion using the auxiliary engines. It will look like the ship is moving in one direction, but we can quietly slip away in another. We avoid confrontation entirely, and no one will know we were here until we're gone." The officers murmured, hesitant to approve an untested maneuver. Lyra studied Jonas carefully. His suggestion was risky, unconventional, and bold. Exactly the kind of approach her species rarely tolerated. Yet it was practical, precise, and based on the data before them. "Do it," she said, her voice firm. "But I want every calculation double-checked." Jonas smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of her trust. He moved to the auxiliary engine controls, inputting the necessary adjustments with steady hands. The ship's response was immediate. Sensors showed to energy rerouting, engines throttling, and navigation systems aligning with his plan. Minutes later, the unknown vessel passed by, unaware that the Aurora's edge had subtly shifted course. The ship emerged unscathed, leaving the crew in a mixture of relief and awe. The alien officers who had once doubted human capability now regarded Jonas with a new respect. Lyra remained silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "You think like a human, yet you act like a strategist. There is value in that." Jonas nodded. "Sometimes rules slow you down. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts." The rest of the day passed with a tense but productive rhythm. Jonas moved from system to system, quietly improving efficiency, fixing minor faults, and advising alien engineers without appearing to interfere. Crew members began to notice a pattern. When humans were involved, problems that seemed insurmountable suddenly had solutions. It wasn't just ingenuity, it was persistence, courage, and the ability to act decisively. By mid-afternoon, Lyra called Jonas to the observation deck. The viewports revealed a cluster of uncharted asteroids ahead, dense and irregular. The ship's sensors indicated gravitational anomalies that could threaten navigation if not managed carefully. "This sector is dangerous," Lyra said, pointing to the data display. "Most crews would avoid it entirely." Jonas studied the readings.
We can navigate through it, he said confidently. The patterns are irregular but predictable.
"I can calculate a path that minimizes risk." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "And you are certain?" Jonas smiled faintly. "Nothing is certain in space, but this is the best chance we have." She hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Take the lead." For the next hour, Jonas guided the Aurora's edge through the asteroid cluster. His calculations were precise, his commands clear. The ship weaved between massive rocks and through unpredictable gravitational pockets with minimal adjustments. The crew followed his lead, trusting his instincts and calculations even when they had no precedent to guide them. When the ship cleared the cluster, the relief was palpable. Crew members cheered quietly, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. The human engineer had done it again, turning a situation that could have been catastrophic into a demonstration of skill, courage, and ingenuity. As night fell aboard the ship, the corridors were quieter, but the shift in perception was complete. Jonas had not only earned the respect of the crew, but had also begun to change Lyra's view of humanity. She had come aboard expecting a species she considered reckless and unpredictable. Yet here was proof of their potential, their creativity, and their ability to act decisively under pressure. The evening meal was subdued, but Jonas found a seat near Lyra once again. This time, no one whispered or stared. His presence had become part of the ship's rhythm, a quiet reassurance that challenges could be faced and solved. Lyra glanced at him from across the table, noting the calm focus in his posture, the casual confidence in his demeanor.
"Human," she said softly. "You have a way of seeing solutions others cannot. It is remarkable."
Jonas looked up, meeting her gaze. "We humans survive by trying what others won't. That sometimes means taking risks."
She considered his words carefully. There was truth in them, and in that truth she saw a potential that no amount of protocol or training could teach.
Perhaps, she thought, humans were not reckless after all. Perhaps they were something else entirely, something other species underestimated, at their own peril. Later, as the ship settled into its course through unexplored space, Jonas returned to his engineering bay. Tools in hand, he moved with quiet efficiency, checking systems and making minor adjustments. Lyra observed from the observation deck, her thoughts lingering on him. She had met diplomats, leaders, and strategists from countless species, but rarely had she encountered someone whose actions spoke louder than their words, whose courage and intellect were so seamlessly combined. Jonas, for his part, was unaware of the subtle shift he had caused. He did not seek recognition or praise. He acted because it was necessary. because the ship needed him, and because he believed in the value of human ingenuity. Yet, slowly, quietly, his presence began to change the way the crew thought about humans. By the end of the day, whispers no longer carried fear or doubt. Instead, they carried curiosity, admiration, and a quiet acknowledgement of the human engineer who had dared to sit beside Lyra Vey, had faced danger with calm determination, and had shown a species that humans could be more than they expected. Lyra herself returned to her quarters that night, her thoughts lingering on the quiet, unassuming engineer who had repeatedly demonstrated skill, courage, and insight. There was a spark of something rare in him, she realized, a combination of bravery and creativity that many species lacked. And she began to understand that humans, unpredictable and stubborn as they were, could achieve greatness in ways others might never imagine. And somewhere deep in the corridors of the Aurora's edge, Jonas continued his work, unaware of the change he had inspired. But the ship, the crew, and even Lyra Vey knew humanity, in its quiet, daring way, had begun to leave its mark. The calm of space rarely lasted for long. The Aurora's edge sailed through the blackness, stars stretching infinitely in every direction, when the sensors suddenly blinked red. The ship's alarm system cut through the quiet hum of machinery with a sharp, insistent tone. An unknown vessel had appeared on the edge of their detection range. It moved fast, its shape unlike anything catalogued in the interstellar records. The readings suggested it was heavily armed and capable of extreme maneuvers. In the command room, the crew froze. Alien officers consulted their protocols, checking and rechecking the data, debating whether to engage, evade, or attempt communication. Their discussion was meticulous but painfully slow. Each protocol required multiple confirmations before any action could be taken, and in the vast emptiness of space, hesitation could be deadly. Jonas Kade stood quietly near the engineering console, observing the readings. His mind worked quickly, calculating possibilities and outcomes. "They're closing fast," he said, keeping his voice calm. "If we wait for full protocol approval, we'll be within range before we even finish hailing them." "We need to act now!" The alien officers glanced at him nervously. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but to speak this directly in a situation of imminent threat was almost unheard of. Lyra Vey, standing at the center of the room, fixed her piercing gaze on him. She had learned to recognize moments of clarity among the chaos, and something in Jonas's calm tone told her he was right. "What do you suggest?" she asked. Jonas pointed to the auxiliary engines. "We can make it appear that the Aurora's edge is accelerating toward the nebula cluster on our starboard side. In reality, we'll slip through an unmonitored path on the port side. They won't expect it, and we avoid a confrontation we cannot afford yet." Lyra studied the plan carefully. It was bold, unconventional, and risky, exactly the kind of move most species would avoid, but it was also smart, precise, and based entirely on the data. She nodded slowly. "Do it. You'll need full control of the navigation systems. Make sure the crew follows your lead." Jonas moved swiftly, his hands flying across the control panels. He rerouted auxiliary power to the maneuvering thrusters and adjusted the ship's trajectory calculations. The alien crew watched in awe and tension, their skepticism slowly giving way to trust. Minutes stretched like hours. The unknown vessel drew closer, its sensors picking up the Aurora's edge's initial movement toward the nebula. It fired a scanning pulse, revealing the ship's apparent heading. Jonas, keeping a steady eye on the sensors, initiated the diversion. The auxiliary engines roared softly as the ship veered slightly off the expected path. The unknown vessel tracked the decoy, misled by the calculated display of movement. The tension in the room was palpable. Crew members gripped consoles, knuckles white, unsure if this gamble would pay off. Then, slowly, the vessel passed the decoy path, continuing along the wrong trajectory. The Aurora's edge had slipped past unnoticed, emerging unscathed on the port side. Relief spread through the room, though no one dared speak immediately. Lyra exhaled softly, her gaze lingering on Jonas. "Your timing and calculations flawless," she said. I see now why humans are unpredictable. Sometimes that unpredictability is our greatest strength. Jonas merely nodded. We survive by trying what others won't, and by trusting our instincts when the rules aren't enough. The rest of the day passed in a tense routine. The alien crew moved with cautious efficiency, now quietly following Jonas's lead on various systems. They still debated protocols, but they did so with a new awareness of human initiative. Each time a minor problem arose, Jonas solved it quickly, sometimes with a clever adjustment that defied standard procedure but always worked. As the crew prepared for a routine check of the ship's engines, Lyra requested Jonas accompany her to the observation deck. The viewports revealed something unusual: a cluster of massive asteroids, irregularly shaped and scattered across an unexpected trajectory. The sensors showed gravitational anomalies that could affect navigation. Alien officers argued over the safest route, each proposal slow and overly cautious. Jonas stepped forward, scanning the data. "We can navigate through this," he said. "The cluster is unpredictable, yes, but we can calculate a safe path that avoids collisions. It requires precision, but it's faster than going around it entirely." Lyra tilted her head, considering the plan. "And you are confident this path is safe?" Jonas smiled faintly. "Safe enough. Nothing in space is completely safe, but this is our best option." With her approval, Jonas guided the ship through the cluster. He coordinated engine thrusts, sensor adjustments, and navigation maneuvers with calm precision. The alien crew followed, adjusting their own systems under his direction. The Aurora's edge weaved through the massive asteroids, narrowly avoiding collisions that would have destroyed lesser ships. When the ship emerged from the cluster, relief and quiet awe filled the command room. Crew members exchanged looks of disbelief. Jonas had once again turned a potentially deadly situation into a triumph of ingenuity and courage. Lyra allowed herself a small smile, the first of many that day. The human engineer had proven, once more, that humans were capable of extraordinary feats when others hesitated. As evening fell aboard the ship, the crew gathered for a brief meal. Jonas took a seat beside Lyra, as he had done before, and neither of them spoke much. The silence was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement of the day's challenges and successes. The crew no longer whispered in fear when humans were involved. Instead, they began to respect the quiet courage and cleverness Jonas displayed, and slowly, the human reputation aboard the Aurora's edge shifted from reckless to remarkable. Midway through the meal, an urgent alert sounded. The unknown vessel from earlier had returned, this time moving more aggressively. Sensor readings indicated that it had changed its trajectory and was now intercepting their path. Unlike before, it was clearly hostile and prepared for confrontation. The command room erupted into activity. Alien officers debated the best response, suggesting evasive maneuvers, communication attempts, or defensive readiness. Jonas, calm as ever, studied the data.
"They are trying to force us into a position where they can fire without obstruction," he said. "We need a solution that minimizes risk and keeps the ship intact."
"If we follow protocol, we will be cornered." Lyra's eyes met his. "And what is your plan?" Jonas pointed to the ship's auxiliary systems and experimental propulsion modules. "We can use the secondary engines to launch a sudden burst, changing our position unpredictably. They won't expect it, and we can disable their targeting systems with an electronic interference pulse."
"It's risky, but it works." The aliens hesitated.
Electronic interference was unconventional, dangerous, and untested on this scale. Lyra, however, trusted Jonas's judgment. "Do it! You will take full control!" "I will monitor from here." Jonas moved quickly, coordinating the engines and electronic systems. The ship responded as he predicted, shifting position with a sudden, controlled burst. The unknown vessel fired, but its weapons missed their target. The interference pulse disrupted its sensors, leaving it temporarily blind. Jonas guided the Aurora's edge away from danger. narrowly avoiding a collision with a nearby asteroid.
The maneuver succeeded.
The unknown vessel, unable to track the ship, eventually retreated, leaving the Aurora's edge safe. Crew members cheered quietly, some shaking their heads in disbelief at the human ingenuity that had saved them again. Lyra allowed herself to speak, her voice carrying both respect and amazement. "You act with courage, intelligence, and precision."
You are exceptional.
Jonas looked at her briefly. "I do what needs to be done. That's all any of us can do in space." As the ship settled into a safe course, the crew's perception of humanity shifted decisively. They no longer saw humans as reckless, unpredictable liabilities.
Jonas had demonstrated that human ingenuity, courage, and quick thinking could turn impossible situations into opportunities for success. That night, as the ship sailed through the quiet void, Lyra returned to her quarters, her thoughts lingering on the quiet engineer who had repeatedly proven his worth. She realized that humans, with their unconventional methods, courage, and resourcefulness, had a potential many species overlooked. In Jonas, she saw not just a skilled engineer, but a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it faced the unknown without hesitation. Jonas, meanwhile, continued his work in the engineering bay. He adjusted circuits, checked propulsion modules, and ensured the ship's systems remained stable. His focus was steady, his mind alert, and his presence quietly reassuring. The crew now looked to him not just for technical expertise, but as a model of human capability, calm under pressure, clever under threat, and willing to take risks others would not. By the end of the day, the Aurora's Edge had survived its first real test. Crew members no longer whispered with fear when humans were present. Instead, they whispered with admiration and curiosity. Jonas had quietly changed the ship's culture, proving that humans could face danger and solve problems in ways that were both unexpected and extraordinary. Lyra, watching from her observation deck, allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had come aboard expecting a species that was reckless and unpredictable. Instead, she had witnessed courage, creativity, and decisiveness. Humanity, she realized, could be a force to respect, a force capable of turning chaos into victory. And in the quiet hum of the Aurora's Edge, Jonas continued his work, unaware of the growing respect around him. But the ship, the crew, and even Lyra Vey knew humanity had once again shown its potential, and the galaxy would not soon forget it. The calm after the encounter with the unknown vessel was deceptive. Even though the Aurora's Edge had navigated dangers successfully, the ship's crew remained alert, aware that the galaxy was full of threats that did not announce themselves. Lyra Vey, now more observant of Jonas Kade than any other crew member, moved with quiet precision as she monitored the sensors and communications. Something had shifted between them. The human engineer had proven his worth repeatedly, and she could no longer see him as reckless. Jonas, meanwhile, worked in his usual quiet manner. The day's minor repairs and adjustments kept him occupied, but he also reviewed the data from the encounter. He noted small patterns in the unknown vessel's behavior, subtle details that most engineers would have missed. These patterns suggested intelligence, strategy, and even intent. Jonas began to consider what they might learn from the encounter and how to prepare for future threats. When Lyra called him to the observation deck, Jonas followed without hesitation. She pointed to the navigation console, displaying a cluster of diplomatic signals from nearby star systems.
"We have an opportunity," she said, her tone thoughtful.
"These civilizations have avoided contact with larger powers, but we now have a chance to negotiate trade agreements, alliances, or shared research."
Protocol suggests we send delegations from multiple species, but I want your opinion.
Jonas studied the signals, analyzing the cultures, communication patterns, and potential risks.
"We can handle this," he said simply.
"We need a straightforward approach. Humans speak plainly, and sometimes that honesty works better than complicated protocols. Other species may respect that more than they respect formal procedure." Lyra regarded him carefully.
You believe your approach could succeed where traditional diplomacy might fail?
Jonas nodded. I've seen it work. Straightforward communication, clear intentions, and trust building can achieve more than endless formalities. It requires courage, though, speaking directly and taking responsibility for the outcome. She allowed herself a faint smile. Very well. You will take the lead in drafting the initial proposals. I will support you. But the choice of words, tone, and approach will be yours. Jonas spent the next several hours drafting communications, balancing caution with clarity. He avoided unnecessary embellishments, focusing instead on honesty and practicality. Lyra reviewed his work, making minor adjustments but largely leaving the language intact. When the messages were ready, they were transmitted across the star systems. The response was immediate. Some civilizations were cautious, replying with questions and verification requests. Others were intrigued, impressed by the straightforward human tone. Within hours, a series of interstellar meetings were arranged, a chance to meet representatives from multiple systems simultaneously. This was unusual. Most species preferred one-on-one negotiations, but the human approach encouraged transparency and direct discussion. Jonas prepared for the first meeting, reviewing cultural norms, language patterns, and potential pitfalls. The alien representatives expected traditional diplomacy, with rigid hierarchies and long-form communication. Jonas, however, remained calm, relying on his instinct and logic. He knew that humans often achieved success by speaking plainly and acting decisively, qualities other species sometimes lacked. As the meeting began, representatives from 5 different civilizations gathered aboard the Aurora's edge. The room was tense, filled with formal gestures, polite nods, and careful observation. Lyra took her seat at the head, and Jonas stood beside her, ready to speak. He began simply, "We are here to build trust. Our intention is to share knowledge, resources, and security. We do not wish to control or dominate. We wish to collaborate." The representatives exchanged surprised glances. They were accustomed to elaborate speeches, formal declarations, and complex rituals. Jonas's words were simple, direct, and unexpected.
The human confidence, coupled with clarity, held the attention of every delegate.
Questions came quickly. One species asked about security guarantees. Jonas answered directly, explaining the ship's capabilities, their commitment to peaceful interaction, and the careful precautions in place to protect all parties. Another species questioned technological sharing. Jonas acknowledged limitations honestly, while offering alternatives that could benefit everyone. Throughout the discussions, Lyra observed silently. She noted how the alien representatives leaned forward, engaged rather than hesitant, responding more openly than they would have to formal protocol. Jonas's human approach had created a bridge where formality would have built walls. By the end of the day, agreements had been drafted that were acceptable to all parties. The aliens left the meeting room cautiously optimistic, their distrust replaced by curiosity and respect. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. Humans, she realized, were capable of creating cooperation where others might have failed. The following days were filled with similar meetings. Jonas continued to play a key role, adjusting strategies based on real-time feedback, offering solutions that were practical and innovative. His calm demeanor inspired confidence, while his straightforward approach built trust among species that had long been wary of outsiders. Meanwhile, life aboard the Aurora's edge continued in the background. Crew members quietly respected Jonas, now seeking his guidance not only in engineering, but also in procedural matters, where human intuition proved valuable. The alien engineers had grown accustomed to his methods, even adopting small adjustments that reflected his influence. Lyra, who once doubted human reliability, now consulted him regularly, valuing his perspective on everything from diplomacy to navigation. One afternoon, during a brief lull in activity, Lyra invited Jonas to the observation deck again. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the potential dangers lurking in uncharted space. "Human," she said, You've done more than repair systems or reroute power. You've changed the way this crew sees humanity. You've shown that courage, clarity, and honesty have value beyond engineering or protocol. Jonas leaned against the railing, gazing at the stars. We humans survive by adapting, by trying solutions others might not consider. It's not about heroics.
It's about seeing the problem clearly and acting. Lyra considered this, her expression thoughtful, and yet your actions inspire confidence, not just in your own species, but in others as well.
You've turned skepticism into cooperation. He shrugged lightly.
I suppose that's part of the job, but it's not just me.
The ship, the crew, the technology, all of it matters. Humans are capable, but we rely on the whole system. A silence fell between them, comfortable yet filled with unspoken understanding. Lyra, for the first time in her diplomatic career, felt a sense of possibility she hadn't expected. Humans were different, unpredictable, and sometimes reckless, but they also had qualities that no protocol could teach: intuition, courage, and an ability to act decisively in uncertainty. That evening, a new alert rang through the ship. Another unknown signal had been detected, this time from a nearby system with an unusual energy signature. Preliminary scans suggested it could be an ancient derelict vessel, drifting in space with unknown contents. Most species would have avoided it, fearing traps or unknown hazards. Jonas, however, studied the data calmly.
It's worth investigating, he said simply. We can prepare precautions, but it may hold valuable information or technology. Ignoring it outright wastes an opportunity. Lyra considered this, recalling the success of human initiative in prior situations.
You'll lead the investigation, she said. I will support you, but this decision is yours. Jonas began preparations, reviewing protocols, assessing environmental hazards, and organizing a small team for the investigation. Unlike the alien crews who might have insisted on lengthy formal plans, he focused on essential precautions, ensuring safety while maintaining flexibility. As they approached the derelict vessel, tension filled the ship. The alien officers remained cautious, but they trusted Jonas's guidance. He led them through the docking procedure, assessing the vessel's structure and energy fields. The interior was dark and silent, filled with strange markings and unfamiliar technology. Yet Jonas moved with careful confidence, analyzing, adapting, and guiding the team through the exploration. Hours passed as they investigated the vessel. They discovered data logs, historical artifacts, and experimental technologies, all untouched for centuries. Jonas's ability to improvise, interpret unknown systems, and make decisions on the spot allowed the crew to extract valuable information without triggering any of the ship's automated defenses. When they returned to the Aurora's edge, the crew was exhausted but triumphant. The alien officers, once hesitant and skeptical, openly acknowledged Jonas's skill and foresight. Lyra, standing beside him, felt a sense of pride and realization. Humanity, unpredictable as it might be, had proven itself capable of turning danger and uncertainty into opportunity. The day ended quietly, with the ship gliding through the darkness of space. Crew members returned to their stations, now confident in the abilities of the human among them. Jonas sat quietly at his console, reviewing the logs and preparing for the next mission. Lyra watched him for a moment, reflecting on the remarkable impact of his presence. Humans, she thought, were not reckless, but bold. They were not unpredictable in a chaotic sense, but inventive. They could see solutions where others saw only obstacles. And in the quiet corridors of the Aurora's edge, humanity's influence was clear, a steady, clever force that inspired confidence, respect, and above all, hope for what could be achieved in the vast unknown. The Aurora's edge glided through a quiet sector of space, the stars stretching infinitely in every direction. For the first time since the human engineer had boarded the ship, there was a sense of calm aboard. The crew moved with confidence, guided by routines honed through experience and the quiet influence of Jonas Cady. Lyra Vey observed the ship's operations from the observation deck, her mind focused yet aware of the subtle ways humanity had changed the crew. That calm was broken suddenly. The ship's sensors blared with warnings as an enormous anomaly appeared on the edge of detection. The readings were impossible, energy fluctuations of a scale that could consume entire star systems, gravitational distortions that defied conventional physics, and spatial interference that threatened to tear the ship apart. The Aurora's edge had encountered something the galaxy rarely saw, a cosmic phenomenon of catastrophic potential. The alien officers froze. Their protocols provided no guidance for such an event. Panic rippled across the bridge as they calculated probabilities, each estimate more frightening than the last. Lyra, however, looked toward Jonas. His presence had become a source of calm in the past, and now she hoped it would guide them again. Jonas studied the sensor readouts. The anomaly was expanding, and the ship's current course would take it directly into the outer fringes of the disturbance. Standard evasive maneuvers might not be enough. "We can't follow protocol," he said quietly. "We need to act differently. The anomaly doesn't follow rules, so neither can we." Lyra's gaze met his. "What do you propose?" Jonas pointed to the ship's experimental propulsion systems and energy redistribution modules. "We can use a combination of auxiliary thrusts and gravity field manipulation to create a temporary corridor through the anomaly."
It's risky. We're essentially bending the laws of physics to make a safe path. If it fails, the ship may be destroyed.
"But it's our best chance," the alien officers balked. Such a plan was unprecedented. Lyra, however, trusted Jonas implicitly.
Whoa!
She had witnessed his ingenuity and calm under pressure.
"You will lead the operation," she said.
"I will coordinate support, but the decisions are yours." Jonas nodded and moved quickly to the engineering bay. The crew followed his instructions with precision, setting up the auxiliary engines and adjusting power flows. He calculated the trajectory in real time, making minute adjustments as the anomaly's unpredictable energy waves shifted and pulsed. The ship trembled under the strain, systems warning of stress beyond normal limits. But Jonas remained calm, guiding the crew through the complex operations. As they approached the anomaly, the Aurora's edge was buffeted by gravitational surges and energy spikes. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the crew braced themselves. Jonas stood at the central console, eyes fixed on the readouts, hands moving with practiced precision. Every calculation, every decision was critical. A single mistake could mean disaster. Lyra watched silently, her admiration for the human engineer growing. He was not reckless, he was decisive, calculating and brave. Humans, she realized, possessed a courage that could turn the impossible into the achievable. The ship began the maneuver. Auxiliary engines fired, creating a controlled thrust that shifted the ship's position. Gravity field modulators activated, bending local space just enough to carve a temporary corridor. The anomaly's energy pulses surged around them, threatening to tear the ship apart, but Jonas adjusted continuously, compensating for every fluctuation. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The crew gripped consoles, knuckles white, trusting in a human who had repeatedly shown that courage and intellect could overcome even the most terrifying challenges. Jonas spoke calmly, giving clear instructions, correcting minor deviations, and keeping everyone focused. Slowly, the ship began to pass through the heart of the anomaly. Energy waves lashed against the hull. Systems screamed in warning, and yet the Aurora's edge held its course. The crew followed Jonas's lead perfectly, each member performing their task with precision and trust in his guidance. Finally, the ship emerged from the other side. The anomaly loomed behind them, a swirling mass of energy and gravitational distortions. But the Aurora's edge was intact. Relief washed over the crew. Cheers erupted, some hesitant, some jubilant, as the impossible had been achieved. The unknown threat had been navigated, and the ship remained unscathed. Lyra exhaled, her gaze meeting Jonas.
"You've done it again," she said softly. You faced what none of us could manage, and you succeeded.
Jonas shook his head slightly.
We succeeded. Everyone did their part. Humans may take risks, but no one survives alone in space.
The alien officers nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words.
Their respect for humans had grown steadily, but now it was undeniable. Humanity's ingenuity, courage, and decisiveness had saved them all. In the following days, the anomaly's data was analyzed. The information Jonas had gathered during the maneuver revealed patterns in the cosmic phenomenon, insights that would prove invaluable for future missions. The crew worked together, combining human creativity with alien precision, and the results were extraordinary. Lyra called a meeting of all crew members. The room was quiet as she spoke, her tone carrying authority and respect. This crew has faced threats that could have destroyed any ship, yet we have survived. We have done so because one among us dared to act with clarity and courage. Jonas Cade has shown us that humanity, unpredictable and bold, can achieve greatness even in the face of the impossible. The crew erupted into applause, not only for Jonas but for the unity that had allowed them to survive. For the first time, humans were not outsiders, not unpredictable liabilities. They were heroes, trusted partners whose ingenuity could be relied upon in life-or-death situations. Later, Lyra approached Jonas quietly in the observation deck. "You have done more than prove your skill," she said. "You have changed the way humans are seen across species. You have turned courage and intellect into trust." Jonas shrugged, a modest gesture.
I just do what needs to be done. Space doesn't reward hesitation.
Lyra smiled. "And yet your actions inspire more than fearlessness. They inspire hope. Perhaps that is the greatest strength of humanity." The ship continued its journey through the stars, each crew member carrying the lessons learned from the anomaly. Jonas returned to his engineering duties, calm and focused, unaware of the admiration he had earned. Yet the entire ship, aliens and humans alike, knew that without his ingenuity and courage, the outcome could have been catastrophic. As the Aurora's edge sailed past distant nebulae and uncharted systems, Lyra sat beside Jonas at a quiet console, the two of them gazing at the stars.
"You know," she said softly, "I once thought humans were reckless, unpredictable."
But now I see you as capable, courageous, and clever beyond measure. Perhaps we underestimated your species all along." Jonas smiled faintly. "We often do things differently, that's all. But when the moment matters, we act." Lyra nodded, the weight of her experiences settling in her mind. "And that is why you will always have a seat beside me." The crew passed by, quietly glancing at the two of them. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The gesture was symbolic, a recognition that humans once doubted had proven themselves equal, and sometimes superior, in courage, intellect, and ingenuity. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the ship's hull. The Aurora's edge sailed on, carrying a crew united by experience, trust, and respect. Jonas continued his quiet work, adjusting systems, reviewing data, and preparing for whatever lay ahead. Lyra watched him, realizing that humanity, in its bold and unpredictable way, had left a permanent mark on the galaxy. And in the quiet hum of the ship's engines, a truth became clear. Humans, when calm, clever, and courageous, could face the impossible, solve the unsolvable, and inspire hope in those who once doubted them. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's potential, and there was no turning back. The stars stretched endlessly, and the Aurora's edge moved steadily through them, a testament to ingenuity, courage, and the power of a species that dared to act when others hesitated. And for the first time, all aboard the ship, human and alien alike, understood that humanity was not merely surviving the galaxy. Humanity was shaping it.